Hi and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today we're looking at the Magical Mystery Bead Box for May 2025, the Sweet Shop. Let's head down to the board and take a look at the components we'll be using from this month's very sweet box. From our lovely box for May 2025, Magical Mystery Bead Box Sweet Shop, we are going to be working with Sweet Treat, gorgeously pastel spacers, our feature bead here, and from the box entitled Sprinkles, we've got some of these cute little babies to play with. Today we're going to be working with 18 gauge round wire. I have medium to firm temper. This is an antique bronze colour coated copper core wire. I flush cut both ends and there's around about 9 or 10 inches or so just here. So what I'm going to do is just warm through half of that to begin with. I'm going to allow it to begin a natural little curve. Doesn't matter if it doesn't do that, we will be able to create that. I'm going to begin by adding on some of these lovely pastel beads from the Sweet Treat mix. Now, so far, every single one I've tried has fit onto this nice 18 gauge wire. And it doesn't really matter if you want to put them on in a particular repeating colour order, you absolutely can. But what we're going to create today is a nice flower garland drop necklace. So just feed on a handful and we'll just keep on going. These are what we refer to in the industry as bone shape, which is a little bit weird, but indeed it allows them to nestle into each other just like a lovely flower garland. So I'm going to continue until I have a nice length of wire covered with these, and when I have completed adding them on, I will join you back in just a moment. I've added on 21 of these little pastel spacer beads from that beautiful Sweet Treat bead pot. And if you just scooch them up gently together, they nestle really beautifully like a flower garland. What we're going to do is allow around about 2-inch length on one side and then just very softly bring that wire around in a nice pear drop shape. If you warm your wire before you start working, this will kind of do the job for you. You don't need to overthink it, and you certainly don't need to put very much pressure on it. Now we're looking to have those beads all nestled up together so that they sit in that lovely fashion. However, if you prefer it a little bit looser, you absolutely can do that as well. It will still look attractive without putting any tension in there at all. Once you've got that basic pear drop shape, we're just going to allow that to sit for a moment, bring in some flat facing pliers to create an upright on the longer tail of wire up at the top. I'm leaving a little gap between the last bead and that angle change. Just give that a shimmy and it will all fall back down into place. You can of course move that around if things get a little bit tense for you. On the shorter piece of wire, I'm going to hold across again and make a turn over to one side, so either across to 9 o'clock or across to 3 o'clock if you're working in the opposite direction. What we're going to do now is to grip across the angle change on the shorter piece of wire, draw that all the way over the top to create a loop that sits around that longer neckline piece. Give that a quick smooth through to get it nice and straight. What we're going to do now is to wrap this shorter tail all the way around that core wire one more time. Now we don't want to put too much pressure on these lovely beads, so I'm going to grip that very firmly. You can either do this by popping your pliers in across that angle change, or you can pinch those two pieces together and just bring that wire around all the way across over the front. I'm just going to tighten up that little spiral we've created just to make sure that it's good and solid. Another way that you will need to just tighten that is to bring that down as close as you can to that angle change. Just going to pull the shorter piece of wire away to one side now and give that a small trim. If you've not flush cut the end, just give that a quick flush cut. This is just over 1.25 inches in length. I'm going to bring in now some round nose pliers to create a little spiral to sit over that joint section. So rotate those round nose pliers around until you get the beginning of a rounded form, And then we're going to push that into the non-dominant hand to create a flat spiral. With spirals, the slower you go, the neater they are. So just very gently bring that all the way to the centre so that it sits in front of that core wire. Make sure that your beads are all sitting how you want them to in the final piece. Again, it doesn't matter if they do sit nestled opposing one another or if they just sit in a jumble. It's absolutely fine. They're going to look beautiful either way. But if you want them to nestle into each other like a flower lei or a garland, you absolutely can take the time to make that happen. Again, you can pinch in that little spiral to make sure that's good and tight, and then bring that spiral down over the top to create the garland part of today's pendant. So once you're happy with how that sits, you can use really any number of beads that you fancy. But today we're going to use one of those lovely donut sprinkle inspired beads over the top, just to nestle above that spiral. And then I'm going to use our glorious feature bead. Slide that down into position. And then I'm going to close off with another one of those sprinkles beads. So they will sit beautifully together. You can go for whichever beads you desire, of course. Now, once you're happy that that's sitting as it all should, pinch that quite firmly into position. I'm going to grip across, side to side, bring the wire forwards, and it just remains to create a round form. I'm going to use my multi-step bail makers. I'll probably use number 4. That fits really well on most chains I've found. So draw that all the way around. I tend to do this in 2 goes. So I've got the first half of my circular form, pop the pliers back in, draw the tail of wire all the way around. So we've got a nice centralised round form, which will create the bail of our pendant. Hold that in position, make sure that you're happy with everything, and then bring that tail around a good couple of times. Now you can either focus on completely filling the gap between your upper sprinkles donut bead, or you can rotate a couple of times to make it nice and secure and add another spiral to balance the one we have down here over the garland at the base. Now we've got lots and lots of beads left in that sweet treat pot. Bearing in mind I also used some to create a prototype before the video began. So if you wanted to make a much larger sweetie garland, there are plenty of beads to enable you to do so. So we'll warm that short tail of wire again, grab in those round to nose pliers one more time and create another spiral. If you don't want a spiral at this position, you can take the tail of wire to the rear of the design and trim away with your flush cutters, and then just chase that wire until it sits flat against the core. I quite like the idea of another spiral. If you want your spirals to be exactly the same size, and I really don't ever bother to do this, what you can do is leave that sticky outy bit of wire until you've got another sticky outy bit of wire at the top, and then measure them to be the same size. However, for me today, I'm just going to bring that spiral towards the top of that drop pendant, and you can either push it upwards so that it sits against the front of that loop that we're going to use as our bail, or you can push it forwards over that sprinkle bead. I really love how these beads nestle together from the pastel sweet treat pot. And that is another design from your fantastic Sweet Shop Magical Mystery Bead Box for May 2025 here at Jessie James Beads.